Hello, welcome to Closing the Distance. I'm Jeff Meyers here with Diane Duane, a longtime member here at Roswell Press, and so grateful, Diane, for you being here with us today. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Good to be here.
So one of the things we're going to try to do during this next season before Lent, we're in this sermon series called Help, and we're looking at areas of human life that really felt needs we have that that our faith helps guide us through, sustain us. And this past Sunday, we looked at finding peace at a time of anxiety. I just, we were just talking before recording, I just drove in. What looked like a tsunami outside, worried about, cars and the pedestrians and rain and light. The boys who I just dropped off at school, they were worried about lightning striking them. They're very anxious about it. And I thought it was very metaphorical for our conversation about trying to find peace in the storms of life, because life presents us with many storms. How have you found ways to find peace amidst the storms of life?
The first thing I would say about that is, and actually Dr. Lane Alderman had a great, he used to say it all the time, I thatched my roof when the sun was shining. And so the thing about when the storms come is that if you haven't prepared yourself, it's going to be really tough to all of a sudden have the tools you need to deal with the storm. And so my experience has been to do exactly that, to practice the things that help us manage anxiety and hold on to our faith prior to when they become really necessary.
Mm-hmm.
Let's start.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you what have you always, because I mean, obviously you lead our yoga ministry. You've got, I mean, and not just here at RPC, but really broadly. I mean, especially during the pandemic, you really exploded it. And it grew and has ministered to so many folks. Have you been a person that's always kind of practiced trying to find peace amidst anxiety, or was there an inflection point where?
Well, there was. So I've always been a mover. So that's my thing. And so when most of us, when we think about yoga now, we think about the practice of all the poses, like moving through a bunch of poses. And so I've always been a mover. I was trained as a dancer and I played a lot of sports. And then I took a yoga class like back in 2000, and it was actually a hot yoga class. And I just loved it. I thought it was great. It was a great way to keep from getting injured, running and stuff, got nice and stretchy and loose. And that was all good. And I practiced kind of off and on until 2011. Well, no, sometime in there, I had gotten, a more regular practice. But then and probably many of you have heard the story. In 2011, I had found myself needing to be still for pretty much months because I was in a car accident. And so I had all these injuries that prevented me from moving and doing all the things that I was used to doing. And the yoga had taught me not so much about movement, but it had taught me how to be still. And so the whole, that's the thing. And it's the breathing, it's the movement and the breathing and connecting the two, and then ending in stillness. That is where I found like a real practical kind of toolbox that helps me maintain equanimity, which is one of my favorite words.
That is a good word. Now, when you just, this reminds me of, golly. So hot yoga. I officiated one of the first weddings I ever officiated. The bride's mother was a hot yoga teacher, and by that I mean warm yoga. I mean, she was. Got to be careful with how you use this language. And I said to her, I said, so let me get. And I'd never heard of hot yoga before, so I was asking her. I said, wait. So you're going to you're going to sit, you're going to stretch in different moves and pull until it hurts, and it's extremely, extremely hot. Isn't that the description of hell? And she said, no, Jeff, no, you need to come try it. I've
a fine line.
Hot yoga, but I appreciate
very fine line
meditation and yoga. Now, okay, let's talk about some of the so people might be listening. They say, "Oh, Diane Duane, she's got it all together. She's figured it out. She doesn't have any stress or anxieties in her life." You have 3 grown children. You're married. You're very involved in many different organizations. What are some of the things that cause you anxiety?
Oh, definitely being overly busy, right? So having to go from one thing to another without any kind of pause or reflection, that takes its toll. What else? Well, family relations. I mean, I'll just put it out there. If it's okay with you, Jeff, we've talked about, my dad actually passed yesterday. And, there's a lot of stress and emotions and anxiety around that. And even then, the practices of moving, breathing, especially breathing, sitting in silence, have been really practical, helpful tools the last couple of days. So,
Well, thank you for sharing that, Diane. And when we talked, I said, you don't have to do this. But then I also thought maybe it might be the most honest way of just speaking into how life happens in ways that are
right.
unpredictable.
Yeah. And like I said to you, Jeff, it's an opportunity for me to practice what I preach. Right. So, I mean, if you're going to have the tools, then use them when you need them.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. I hate practicing what I preach. Well, you're such a blessing. Okay, so let's say, how often do you practice? And what is your practice consist
Okay. So it's always evolving. And recently I have been sitting in silence in meditation more. And so I've been doing that every day for a while now. No, I mean, not years, like since last June. And so that is a really, really grounding practice, but it's, it's hard. It's really hard.
So you practice every day or try to?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And like how long do you do?
Usually 20 minutes. So, but it's not something you get good at necessarily. Every day is different. Some days, the Christian tradition has a long history of sitting in silence. We just seem to kind of have lost it and assigned it to Eastern traditions that we sometimes are even kind of afraid of. But Christian contemplative prayer is, it's been around since Thomas Aquinas, I think. And the whole thing about that is every time you get distracted and you lose the ability to pay attention just to your breath, it's another opportunity to come back to God.
Mm.
So in essence, the worse you are at it, the better off you are. It's not something, we don't perfect it at all.
Yes.
So
one of my best friends is an assistant U.S. attorney here in the Atlanta area for the Justice Department. And he's, prosecuted various kinds of cases over the years. And I asked him, and he's one of the, other than you, maybe one of the most disciplined practices of meditation. And I asked him, I said, why do you do it? And he said to me, he said, just to like get through the day, like to kind of cleanse one's mind, to center oneself. Because he says, I was always so angry. I was, my emotions would get the best of me. And he found a way to center himself and find peace and let the chaos kind of swirl around, but find that eye of the storm, right, and center himself. And it was really prophetic. It's funny when a prophetic word is sit still and do nothing.
Right. Don't just do something, sit there.
Yeah. And that's doing nothing is sometimes the hardest thing to do.
Right. Well, it doesn't make any sense, right? So I actually looked up it was Philippians 4:7 that you preached on yesterday, I think. So I looked up a couple of the Greek words, and interestingly enough, the root for peace in that, I think, in that passage is iro, or it can mean to join. So that's a way of like, just sitting and joining getting back in touch with our body and just breathing. The word for surpass can mean rise above reason. So,
Oh,
I mean, it doesn't make any sense, right? We are caught up in reason and logic and science and all that stuff, but it doesn't make any sense that we could just sit still and be in silence. And that is what can get us through. But it can.
yeah, absolutely. So, as Presbyterians, we consider ourselves, fairly educated. You don't want to educate ourselves about things. If folks were looking to read some kind of teachers on these practices, who are folks that we could consult that you found helpful in your own
Right.
journey that might be helpful for us?
Yeah. So I mentioned Christian contemplative prayer. Basil Pennington. It's an old book. I think it's got a foreword by Thomas Keating.
Okay.
It's called An Introduction to Centering Prayer. Is a great little book. It's not very long. This year, actually, Richard Rohr, which I'm a huge Richard Rohr fan. He's at the Center for Action and Contemplation, which is a whole other part of it. His devotionals this year are on resilience or resiliency. And so I think that's a great daily resource people might check out. And the thing about that is when we get anxious about things, I noticed this particularly in 2020, there was so much anxiety, not only around the pandemic, but racial issues. And people didn't know what to do with it. They wanted to do something and they didn't know what to do with it. And part of what sitting in silence can give us is that space, that ability to just wait and then listen for the Spirit to know what exactly it is ours to do. So we don't fly off trying to accomplish something that we're not skilled or gifted to do. So those are two resources. I think probably you could find some Richard Foster stuff about sitting in silence and meditation. And he actually does caution, like careful how you go into it, because if you're not really seeking a closer relationship with God, your brain or that sin separation from God is just going to make it worse. And you're just going to start spinning. Your wheels are just going to start spinning stories they're just going to feed your anxiety. Yeah. So
absolutely. His book, Celebration of Discipline, on kind of a myriad of disciplines, very helpful. And it was really helpful recovering from Protestants, I think, in the 80s,
right.
Just like you mentioned, this like long tradition that had kind of gone dormant and people didn't know about. And I think people have really been blessed through his writing and work. Actually, you mentioned Richard Rohr. I don't know if I told you this. When I my first year at RPC, somebody gave me a daily devotional of Richard Rohr's. It was selections from various books he'd written for 365 days. And so that was how I got started devotionally when I was here at RPC. It was really, really helpful when I felt like, oh my goodness, what have I gotten myself into? To come back, okay, find your center in your prayer life. You're going to be okay. But to find that center with myself and with God was really, really important. Well, what do you think? What do you think we practice a little bit?
I think that would be great. I think for some it will be easy, and for some of us it'll be really hard. And but it's a way to get started.
Absolutely,
it's kind of like training, just training a little bit. So, what do you think about 5 minutes?
Yeah, let's do 5. And why don't you do maybe like if you were leading a group, so let's just assume there's a bunch of folks that are listening. Now, if you're in your car driving, hit pause and pull over, wait till you get home. But other than that, why don't you just guide us through what you would do and teach us?
Okay. And so while the invitation is for to sit in silence, I might occasionally during the 5 minutes, give you a verbal cue to bring you back, or kind of a tip to help stay centered. And so, so the first thing is, posture. You could sit on the, if you're at home, you could sit on kind of a couple of pillows or a cushion of floor with your legs crossed. You want to have your back kind of away from the back of a chair. So if you're able to, sitting so that your spine is naturally straight. And so I'm going to invite you to close your eyes and just kind of check in with your body if you can have your feet flat on the floor if you're in a chair. And check in with the legs, that they're comfortable enough to sit for a few minutes in stillness. Stillness is a prerequisite for concentration or single pointed focus. Then try and keep your eyes still, whether they're open or closed. Keep your shoulders stacked right over your hips, back as straight as possible to support you, head over the neck. Just check in with the teeth, relax the tongue and the jaw, and then begin to focus on your breath, in through the nose and out through the nose. So for the scientists in you, there's actually a study that says breathing in through the nose and out through the nose is better for our brains neurologically than breathing through the mouth. So what you might do is notice the cool inhale, and then the warmer exhale on the top of your lip. The coolness on the inhale through the nostrils, warmer, subtle sensation as you exhale on the top of the lip. Quite frankly, when I started, it took me about 2 weeks to notice that subtle warmth. So that's all you have to do. One breath is a complete practice. Inhaling, relax. Exhaling, stay alert. And see if you can find that space where the exhale turns into the inhale again. So if you're already starting to panic a little bit, one of the insights of meditation is that nothing is permanent. Just relax on the inhale. Stay awake on the exhale. It said that if you can stay focused on your breath for 5 breaths in a row, automatic concentration or focus will come naturally. Try and let your breath just flow freely, not forcing neither the inhale nor the exhale. Another insight is that nothing, if it is real, lacks intrinsic satisfaction. So this is just is what it is, not necessarily good or bad. Those are just stories we tell ourselves. Just a few more breaths. Cool sensation on the inhale. Subtler, warmer sensation on the exhale. And see if you can find that space where the exhale turns back into the inhale. Then when you're ready, just slowly and gently, maybe flat your eyelashes a little bit. Bring your attention back to your space. And take a moment before you begin moving and speaking to notice if there's a difference in how you feel. And there you go.
Mm.
That was actually more than 5 minutes, a little bit more. So well done.
Wow.
You all stuck with me.
That was great.
And you might not feel any different. Again, it's a practice.
Right.
So.
Okay. Coming back to my body.
Mm-hmm.
I have some questions.
Mm-hmm.
I noticed my mind, I started wandering. I was thinking about people I needed to call at the hospital today, thought about my grocery list. How should I treat those thoughts that I have?
So in Christian contemplative prayer, they use the 4 R's. And the first one would be resist no thought. So you let them float by like a puffy cloud. Or you could think of yourself at the bottom of a shallow stream and that you're just floating underneath the surface, and that's just a leaf floating down the stream away from you. So the first is resist no thought. They're just going to happen. But the next one is retain no thought. So once you've noticed the thought, let it go. The most important one for me might be react to no thought. So no judgment about it. Just let it go. Yeah. And then it's just return. So return to your breath and just begin again. So I think for me, it's that, try not to judge yourself about it. For me, it's always the grocery list, right? Or the 3 next things I need to do kind of thing. So sometimes I find myself, I get caught up in a story that might have been like 5 minutes long. And it's taken me that long. Like I'm so totally into the story. I've bought my ticket to Paris and booked a hotel and, and so, oh my gosh, just come back and let it go.
Yes.
So,
yeah. What do you think? I'm trying to remember this woman. Do you know Sarah Coakley?
Mm-mm.
She's a theologian, but also blends like systematic theology and spiritual practices. Mm-hmm. She was teaching at Harvard Divinity School, and she wanted to become an Episcopalian priest. And she had to do an internship. And so she became a chaplain at the Boston City Jail. And she went in and led it was really cool. She went in and led a centering prayer group. It's called
I think I've heard of this. Yeah.
Prayer is, what is it called? It's like, prayer is resistance or something. Mm-hmm. And she said, a jail, it's so noisy that finding any peace is really difficult. Mm-hmm. And many of these men were African American, actually. And so she said, y'all know that St. Augustine of Hippo, one of the most important writers in Christian history, was African. And, he talks about centering prayer, and it has roots, that go back to Augustine even before. And it was just such a powerful, again, prophetic word of, even in the most chaotic environments of conflict, you can find peace through this practice. Do you think, does it matter when I do it? Should I do it at the same time every day? Can I vary?
That's a good question. But also I want to save just a couple minutes because I want to ask you a question, if you don't mind. I have found that it does it's better to do it first thing in the morning because it's kind of way to set yourself. There's lots of other things that can go along with it. There's a meditation or loving kindness meditation, which is a great way to start the day, which is you start with compassion and kindness for yourself and then others. And so you kind of grow that energy so that when you get into a difficult situation during the day, you can kind of come back to that groundedness. So probably best first thing in the morning, but honestly, my discipline has not extended that far. So even if it's, after dinner, better sometime than not at all.
Right. And do you find it helpful to move around, like to do it in different places, or do you try to do it in the same place?
I think it's easier to have a space, and do it in the same place. But it's, it's not about that. So we travel a lot, and I've had to make do and make up, and actually the space between you board a plane and it takes off is about 20 minutes. It's a perfect time to do it.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, this has been really interesting, Diane. Thank you so much for.
You're welcome.
Can
I ask you a question?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so I'm curious about what are the things that you hear from people? You're in the turtle flipping business. What are the things that you hear from people? And if you don't know what that means, go back and listen to Jeff's sermon. But what are the anxieties that people bring to you most often?
I think, marriage problems with family, I think financial problems, I think stress at work. I think the future. I think a lot of people watch a lot of TV news and they're worried about things on the other side of the world. They're worried about the state of politics, the very isms, you mentioned racism. I think that causes a lot of people anxiety. And in my experience, a lot of these things, there's nothing you can do about it. Like we can pray, we can call our legislators if it's political, we can try to change, but the work environment, whatever. And I'm not saying we don't have agency and we shouldn't act, but I think a lot of us feel helpless. And I think I found recommending people to have a regular meditative centering prayer practice is, like you mentioned, learning to let those anxieties, those ideas, those fears float away. That we have to find something to connect with God in a way that's disconnected from those anxieties and worries, that those can't be at the center of our lives.
Right. Yeah. So I appreciate that. I have a couple of things I want to close on that. So that's why backing up and sitting in stillness is so important, because it might give us the freedom to realize that that's not ours to fix. For instance, in my case, I spend a lot of my time trying to equip others to be able to go out and do what they can do in the world, but I can't go out there in the world and do it all too. I'm working in my space to equip others. And so there's that. So learning what is yours to do and not to do. And I just want to go back to that verse. And it struck me that, the peace that passes all understanding, we have to pass on a lot of other stuff, pass on social media, pass on the news, pass on, thinking that all of the family drama is your fault or that you need to fix it. There's a lot of things we can pass on to get to that peace, and it'll make it a lot easier.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's finding that healthy balance of you have agency to love, to work for justice in the world, but you're not God. And the world is not at your beck and call. It's not, you can't change it all by yourself. You can do something, but you can't do everything. And so, but most of our lives, we're going, like you mentioned, the modern world, we're going, and you have to step away or you'll be overwhelmed.
Right.
So
I agree.
Diane, thank you so much. If people want to be a part of because you have a regular, like both in-person and virtual yoga practice, right? That people.
Yeah, most of it's still virtual, but I'm right up the street from Roswell Presbyterian, and people are welcome to reach out. I'm in the RPC directory, and we'll start back up on Tuesday evenings. We usually practice for 10, 12 weeks or so, beginning sometime before Lent and go into the early summer. So we'll start that up again soon.
And you have a regular email you send out every Sunday.
I
How
do.
if people want to subscribe to that, how can they access it?
Okay, so they can either just email me my personal email that's in the church, or so the place that they can find me on the internet is called Almost Home Yoga, which point of that is it's a journey, and we never really get there. We just keep practicing. So almosthomeyoga.com, and you'll find me there. Thanks for asking.
Well, that I'm excited. I love encouraging people to meditate. I think it's a really practice that can be really transformative. Yeah, as we said, it's sometimes doing nothing can be the hardest thing to do.
It's a tsunami out there, Jeff. We got to do all we can to find the eye of the storm.
Amen.
Which we both know is our faith, right?
Absolutely.
Faith in God. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Diane Duane. Thank you for closing the distance today, and I'll see you soon.
Welcome. All right. Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.